Welcome to Basement Tales with Sam Jackman, Charlie Einsman, Ed Grass, and Sandra Delancey. We have fun telling crazy but true stories about turning the worst possible property disasters into bags of money. Along the way, we'll pass along some important lessons to help you make cash on real estate. Sam and Charlie walked away from cubicle hell 25 years ago. Starting with no property, they created their own Clear Sky group of companies, sold hundreds of houses, bought dozens of rentals, and made millions in hard money loans. I'm Ed, a big firm litigator until muscular dystrophy made me find a hobby other than suing people. I miss it. Sandra's the normal person here with a real job plus some rentals. Her decades of friendship with the group, from office flunkies to property gurus, might help keep us all humble and focused on learning something. I wouldn't count on it. Well, I had a little bit of an idea for a topic.
Okay.
I don't know that it's a good idea, but I was thinking about. I was putting together some materials for the our effort to sort of track bankruptcy matters and try to find some leads through that whole thing. And it made me think about the whole hidden market and different ways to try to uh, find these properties. With Charlie, of course, being the expert, and I'm sure I've heard many of them over the years. There's got to be some crazy ass stories involved with that, but so that's one possibility for a topic. And thud.
Well, that's kind of what you want to talk about, right, Sam? The upcoming bankruptcies and moratoriums and all that, or
Yeah, I wanted
Oh
to.
yeah,
There's a couple things I wanted to mention when
mm,
we got rolling. What we found out there is no inventory here in Northern Virginia, and none in sight in D.C., Maryland too, um, in the metro area, because of all of the court holdups, closures, and evictions and moratoriums. I think that it's going to be a long while. Charlie had long said a while ago. I said it was going to be a bubble and that there'd be all these inventory in May or something like that. But I don't think they're going to ever let it happen like that. By the time this inventory works its way out, it'll be a year from now before things are really moving.
well, I get all of the lawyer magazines because I'm a member of the bar still in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and pretty much every they send out their magazines, and pretty much every one of them is like the looming eviction crisis because the backlog of evictions is enormous, and they seem to think at some point there'll be a starting pistol, and all of a sudden 80 bajillion evictions are going to go forward. But it seems like there'd have to be some kind of intervention. And even if there's not, there's only so much capacity the existing court system has to process that stuff. So it's gonna be somewhat slow regardless. But I mean, that's then a political question. Are they going to interfere with the eviction process?
They're going to interfere.
Yeah, Sam's going for the interfere.
Yeah, the interfering team one or might win or whatever it is. They're going to interfere.
And is that what you're seeing, that capacity issue? Is that true for the regular retail market as well, or are you talking about more the
Well,
distressed
the people
inventory?
aren't, well, the distress market for sure, right? There's simply nothing to pick up, and in the retail market, people are staying put for a while. So it's not a lot of inventory, and there is enough demand for people who have to switch because of their job or their family status and their housing needs. It outstrips the supply by a long shot.
Hmm.
What do you think, Charlie?
yeah, I mean, I agree. I think you got a double-edged sword, right? You have the moratoriums, you have the evictions, and the evictions are both on the commercial side and they're on the residential side. Matter of fact, tomorrow is the first time that I have started to see an uptick in commercial foreclosures. So just in Alexandria and Arlington alone, there's in Alexandria there's a big office building getting foreclosed on, and in Arlington on Queen Street there's 3 properties that comprise of a restaurant and some mixed use commercial getting foreclosed on as well. So it looks like the commercial side on the foreclosures is starting to trickle through. And so I
Right,
thought that was pretty interesting.
right, because there's basically no moratorium on that. It's all residential moratorium, right?
Right.
I guess the thing, it's more of a private limit. The banks may figure this is not the best time to foreclose, I suppose,
Right, and the banks don't necessarily have the same reporting requirements to the regulators right now.
because in 2008 on the residential stuff they had to report the mark to market and all that stuff. But on you
They had to
thinking on
dump
the
it. Right, they had to dump their inventory.
right, right, whereas the commercial they don't as much. And of course, I guess that will be interesting to see. Maybe that's where there's some purchase opportunities, but it's going to be a risk because nobody knows how much and what type of commercial is going to come back. What do you think, Charlie? Do you think an
Yeah.
office building, if you can get it at the right, I mean, I guess if it's
No,
free,
I
right
think the
price.
play is going to be it's going to be a repurposing play. So what's happening in a couple of companies that I've talked to lately is that they are so happy with the productivity of their employees working from home that they're already lowering their space for office space. And so what's going to end up happening is I think if you can find what's called a repurpose play, buy a commercial office building and then repurpose it into condos, that's probably a good idea because you're going to see a lot of that starting to happen because the office space isn't going to it's in a bad situation. I don't know when that's going to recover. And the other thing that's happening is the people moving out of the cities. That's still happening as well, especially the higher density cities. And I don't know when that's going to come back either. I mean, that's going to take some time.
Interesting. Yeah, I just saw a notice from auction.com about a commercial property now that you mentioned that. And they said it's like a little strip mall, a little beat up strip mall outside of DC. And it looked to me like somebody probably bought it and was going to redevelop it and then didn't have the money or the timing was wrong and it was getting foreclosed on. But it also had like a little office building as part of it. Good size though, not like a two-story, like maybe five or six. And in the ad, it said something like repurpose for mini storage. Take the which I thought was kind of a creative idea for that. And I know mini storage is a pretty good revenue generator,
Yeah.
something you guys have always wanted to do, but never have quite
Oh yeah.
had the right opportunity.
Now that to me would be a great repurpose effort into a mini storage, just because that's a good cash flow monster. And so as we were talking about for tomorrow, uh, there's a commercial office building going to foreclosure in Arlington, and the tax assessment alone is $58 million. So that's a
Wow.
pretty big size office building, and that's the first office building that I've seen go to the foreclosure blocks in a long time. Then the properties that are in Alexandria is a combination of commercial and restaurant, and there's actually three storefronts that are going tomorrow. And so, like I said, this is the first that I've seen of this. And so, like you were saying earlier, Ed, if you can get into some sort of repurposing strategy, that's probably the best way to go, and that's probably how you're going to make pretty good money. But it's going to take time because, just like you were saying, if somebody's going to repurpose an office building to a storage space, then they're probably going to have to go and get some zoning use. Either it's a special use permit or a rezone, and so that effort could take a long time, especially with none of these government agencies wanting to work these days.
Yeah, that would be my big concern. Is all of the regulatory stuff. Not even so much if it takes a while, but if it's even doable. Um, I mean, I've been a lawyer for a while and understand real estate somewhat, but all the vagaries, particularly of changing a use, makes me nervous. But I suppose the thing is, if a lawyer who does that kind of thing, you can have a real leg up. I mean, that's what we're always talking about, trying to find a bag of money. If this one I'm talking about, if you're able to figure out that yes, you pretty much by right could change it into a storage place, then you know what it's worth and can bid the right amount to get the thing. I guess the other approach is if it's if you could stabilize it as is, and you're pretty clear to make a profit that way, then you could sort of jump in and get it, and then take some time to figure it out. But I don't know how stable how stable these things are. A $58 million office building. I mean, this is only, I think the bid on this thing starting at $500,000, although it'll at least go for a couple million, I would think. But 58 million, there's got to be a pretty small universe of people that could bid on that, A, and then B, could actually do something with it.
Yeah, converting it, I just can't imagine the level of work, because the plumbing systems aren't built at all for residential use, and neither are the layouts or any of that. So it could cost as much as building something from a brand new.
Yeah, well,
for some of these conversions.
in this case, the deposit alone is $2 million. So I think that's going to take a lot of people out of this particular auction.
I've seen some contests and things about trying to find, I guess, unique uses for affordable housing. And I've seen like strip malls and things like that, not necessarily these huge corporate office buildings, but strip malls that, would go unused and, just kind of eventually, just, go by the wayside, be demolished, and
people just move into every Applebee's across the country because no one's going back.
They take the whole strip mall and just kind of repurpose it into affordable housing, and it works. And people have won contests doing this. So,
well, that's a brilliant approach. One of the things that I'm doing in another life, and I'm doing it as we speak, is we have another trailer park home that's being purchased by a builder developer, and they're getting kicked off their trailer park, and they've been there for 50 years, 60 years.
Manufactured housing, Charlie.
I'm sorry, manufactured housing. But as we all know it's a mobile home park. And so what's happening is these guys can't move their manufactured homes or their mobile homes or their trailer parks, whatever you want to call it, trailer homes. And so what's happening is that there's a certain amount of acreage that the county owns, and they're maybe willing to donate it, but in exchange, instead of building another trailer park, what they want to have set on this piece of land is what's called a modular home park.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether it's a modular home park or some sort, or a fabricated home park, which they're two different things, then these local jurisdictions are going to start to go for these kinds of modular home parks. And I'm talking where the lot radius is maybe 90 feet by 100 feet. And then the one level property is either 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, square footage anywhere from 980 square feet to about 1,300 square feet. I mean, these things are starting to come into play, especially on the East Coast. Now, they're kind of popular on the West Coast, but as far as the East Coast is concerned, as far as affordable housing is concerned, these things are starting to raise their head. And so that's kind of interesting that you would mention that, Sandra.
Yeah, I think the whole, tiny house boom or tiny home boom is here, and 800 to 1,000. I mean, that's a big tiny home. That's pretty big. You can probably get 3, 4 tiny homes out of that. We're talking like 200 square feet. That people are they're thrilled to have these places that they can close the door and call home.
So when you, I mean, obviously when we grew up, right, it was called trailer homes, and then obviously manufactured homes is more of the common term now. But then what's the difference with a modular home? Is that just that it's a little bit more permanent, but it comes on the back of a truck, or how does that work?
All right, so there's two different kinds, right? So and I'll get into both. There's a modular home park, and then there's a prefabbed home park. The modular home park, yeah, it's just like you say, both kinds are affixed to a concrete slab. So they are permanent structures. The modular home is actually built at the factory, and they actually carry the modular home to the site itself. A prefab home is basically where they take all the wood and the windows and all those kinds of things, and they bring that to the site, and then they can actually construct the home on site on the same slab. So there's two different kinds and two different variations, but they're both permanent structures.
I see. So it's like a Lego kit, right? If you
That's
get
what it is.
prefab.
Yep. So the modulars, where they just take the module, they might take 3 modules, put it together on site. A prefab is they take the whole thing. legalized, as you just said, and put it together. Yeah.
I've got a little trend here. So this isn't exactly local, but since we lend all over Virginia, we're lending in Richmond. And so I spent about an hour, just an hour ago, actually, talking to a contractor down there who's working on a few projects, and I talked to his real estate agent. And I know Richmond because I'm from there, and there are areas that are getting redeveloped very rapidly there, and there's very limited capital available, and there's very limited labor available. And so the consequence is that the margins are real strong. These guys are consistently getting 20% gross margins off of the out sale price, and their days on market are like 15 days. And so in Richmond, if you put $100,000 into a property, it's a total renovation and your out sale price is of $400,000. There aren't a lot of people with cash to do it, and then there's only a few skilled labor teams working on it. And there are tons of assets on the MLS and all around. Richmond could be a strong market for people who want to. If you're coming out of Fredericksburg, don't go north; just head south for an hour.
And what is the main reason that that's so good? Is there just a lack of?
There's a lot of inventory. There's abandoned houses, and the process for permitting is simplified. And the pipes aren't all lead pipes, and it's just a lot more. They were sturdy structures when they were built 60 years ago, and they're not just falling down on themselves. So there's good inventory to renovate, but they're total renovations. You have to be skilled at it. At the same time, there's huge demand for people who want to live near an urban space, and they're young professionals to buy them. And there's plenty of jobs for Capital One and government jobs paying bills down there. So you can have what's in Arlington. It's a $1.2 million home for $400,000 down there. And so the differential on your earnings, I mean, you won't earn quite as much as working at Capital One up here, but the houses are a third the price, and they're nicely located, and they're all renovated. A lot of good opportunities for people.
Yeah, but not only that, you hit for all you guys out there, you hit an important nail on the head, and you talked about the permit process. And so if any of these jurisdictions have a brain on their head, anytime they can simplify this permit process, the better it is for that area. Just because up here in Northern Virginia, Maryland, DC, we've had so many bad experiences with the local jurisdictions. So, if the city of Richmond or the counties in the Richmond area, if they can have an easier permit process, then that's much better for rehabbers.
Because I was going to say, I mean, Baltimore has for a long time has a lot of inventory, but I guess Sam alluded to they have a lot of lead paint problems and a lot of regulatory things to build. But I mean, I know you guys don't really do Baltimore much, but do you think it's worth people exploring? Is that a place you could pick up? I mean, obviously they're distressed properties, but is it something that you could make money on?
I think you can make money there, but the risks there are so significant with risk of loss while you're in the construction process, and then the prices supports are not as high, and there really isn't that much demand as far as I can tell, other than academic folks, and they've got a great university system in Baltimore and hospital system, but beyond that, there's no other drivers for growth, and that's what Charlie can speak to, but he and I concluded that one. And Ed and I went up there, and we went on a tour of the whole place, if you recall, Ed.
Yeah, and the other big issue with Baltimore is not only the economic drivers, but just as importantly, it's not fee simple. I mean, a lot of the properties have ground rents, and so what that means is that you don't even own the land that the property is on. And so what you got to do is you got to figure out who the rent holder is, and you got to make a deal with them to buy out the ground rent system so that you can get what's called a fee simple ownership. So in our case, I mean, it just doesn't make sense to do loans on something that you don't even own the land on, because the most valuable piece of any real estate is the land. So if the owner is renting out, if somebody else owns the land and all you own is a structure, then you don't really have much out there as far as collateral. And so we don't like that one bit.
Yeah, what do we get as collateral? We get an asset that's worth like $9,000, and then a possible blemish. We have to go through a process in order to get the land to be fee simple. So all the value is created in the construction process. And I haven't, similar to this gentleman telling me that he's having trouble finding labor in Richmond, the labor that I found up in Baltimore, it's spotty at best to find people who are able to to come together and put a house up. Especially you're standing up an entire structure on something that's 100 years old.
Yeah, not only that, and you know, Baltimore isn't the only place that has ground rents. Sometimes, in our case, on the commercial side, if we go to do maybe a commercial loan on a, you know, on a structure, whether it be a restaurant type structure, whether it be a warehouse type structure, one of the most important things is that we have to understand is, do they own the underlying land itself? I mean, I've killed a bunch of deals where they were paying ground rent. In other words, it might have been a Fuddruckers restaurant, and the actual, if the Fuddruckers restaurant owned the land itself, the collateral would have been worth about 1.5 million. And so they would want a loan of 500,000. But because this particular property was leasing the ground, I mean, that took the whole value away from the property, and that made our loan very risky. And so we didn't do the deal. And that's happened to us a bunch of times, especially in the commercial space. It's not only with Baltimore, but it happens to be all over the area if they're doing ground rents. So you got to be very careful on that as well.
I was just going to say, who typically owns the ground? You know, you're saying, you know, you're renting it, but who owns it? Is it the state? Is it some government agency or personal, you know,
Investors.
investors?
Yeah. Like, for example, you might see a lot of build to suit. And so let's say a Dollar General will come in there and they'll do a build to suit. So somebody will take a piece of land that they own. They'll build a building specifically for a Dollar General. A Dollar General will come in there, lease that building for 20, 25 years. And then once Dollar General is gone, the building and the land is theirs. And so if that person were to come to us and get a loan, we wouldn't necessarily loan on the value of it. We'd probably loan it based on the lease of Dollar General's lease. And so that happens all the time on the build to suit side.
And so in a place like Baltimore, then you can have the ground owned by, you know, Mr. Jones, and Miss Beth owns the property, to unrelated people. Is that common?
It is common.
Yeah, I know in DC, I've heard of, you know, one of the corporate office buildings here that close to me where a family kind of owned the land, right? And they allowed some investor to come in and build a huge corporate office building on top of it. And, you know, you still, you know, it's 50 years of, you know, rental from this family. So this family is, you know, really just sitting back and, you know, collecting, you know, rent from this corporate, you know, this corporation for 50 years, which is a great deal.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing.
And there's another famous property that's across the river from the Watergate. Sam, what's that?
It's in Arlington. It's a cooperative. And it's
Yeah,
right.
it's called Riverwalk, right?
Yeah, and it's right across from Iwo Jima and also, you know, the boathouse in Georgetown. It's really nice.
Yeah, and so that thing's comprised of 4 or 5 buildings of condos. There's probably, I'm just guessing, there's probably 500 to 600 condos. But these condo owners, their value is getting closer and closer to zero because the lease on the ground rent is about ready to come up. And so once that lease expires, then the actual property owner can do whatever they want with that piece of ground. And so the value of the co-op is going down. And so what they're going to have to do is either buy that landowner out, which they haven't done yet, or renegotiate a much longer term lease. And so stay tuned for that. I think that lease comes up in 25 years, right, Sam?
Yeah, it sure does. And another one, just to finish this one off, is there's a ground lease on the Wegmans that's in Fairfax County out of Route 50. That one out there. Charlie and I met the family that leased it to the Wegmans for like 100 years, and they just leased it 10 years ago. So they're just getting rolling.
So we got to find some cheap land.
That's what we need to do. That's thriving there. That's how you thrive for the next 100 years. Your family gets, you know, whatever ground rent.
Yeah, that lays off a lot of risk that family members will sell the assets and make bad decisions. So you're hoping 100 years later there'll still be someone who can think for the business side of it, right?
There'll be someone that looks like Sam who's saying, "Let's sell it." Some great grandson.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so since we're talking about this topic, maybe the last topic we want to touch on is normal residential evictions. And so one of the things that we've seen from the residential eviction side is that, you know, through the COVID crisis, is that obviously the government's not allowing landlords to evict normal residential tenants. And what we're saying is that once a rental property goes up on the market, it's like a feeding frenzy. And so in all my years of doing real estate, especially in this area, we've never seen a rental market frenzy like we're seeing in at least the Northern Virginia area, as far as rents. And so that's kind of interesting. And so that's driving up rents left and right just because there's not enough rental inventory available for people that want to rent, especially people moving in from out
So
of state.
Sandra, follow up with that. How's the rental process going for your new rental? Have you found anybody of interest?
We have gotten a couple of bites. We don't have anyone yet. We actually were at the property this morning. There's still some work being done on it. So I'm not quite ready to, rent it out. We're still trying to go through the business licensing process with DC, which is another, ordeal, for lack of a better word. My husband submitted a business license. He put the wrong address on it. So they came to inspect our house, which of course is not the location of the
Did it
business.
pass?
Okay.
He had no
They came
idea.
up to AU Park.
He had no idea that, that was the address that we were supposed to put on the form. He put our home address on there and supposed to go and, inspect the property address. And yeah, it turned into a big thing. So now he's saying, well, I have to submit another business license for another few $100s. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. We're going to talk to someone about this. I know it was
How many hours is that going to take to talk?
I know it was, our mistake or your mistake. I'll take the blame too. Our mistake, but I don't think that they should, penalize us like, hundreds of dollars to put in another business license because we put the wrong address on the thing. So.
Well,
All right.
DC, they never make any mistakes on that sort of thing. So, they're of course I'm being facetious, but
Sandra, you're going to have to keep us posted if you get your money back. That's what we have to see.
Some people have told me that we should use, our influence here in DC. So we'll see what that means.
Oh, okay. Anyone for a dollar bet on that influence?
No,
the ability to influence.
Oh yeah, I'm in.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
in.
I okay. So
Not a chance.
last year I worked with
I'm in, not a
a
chance.
politician in Maryland, and I was just amazed at the amount of calls that this office got on everything.
Okay.
Anything. Traffic tickets, speeding tickets, toll tags, easy pass, everything came through her office. And, she responded to it. So I'm going to do something similar. I'm like, you know what?
constituent services, they love to do that stuff. They figure if they can help you out or even try to help you out, you'll vote for them next time. So,
Well, Ed, did you have that? Did they help you when you were trying to resolve the tax issues on some of those tax liens?
with threats, with it was. Well, I was going to say there's different ways to do it. I was going to suggest to Sandra, there's begging, and I've done the begging route. There's constituent services where you get a politician, hopefully, to help you. And then there's implied threats. And then there's express threats. I think you just went through that on Pepco, didn't you, Sam?
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. I think this is a good segue into Sam's kind of funny story of the day with the Pepco Staples incident.
So we're trying to get power connected at Staples, and I think everyone has been to Staples and seen this house. The property was an old church previously used as a church, and then prior to that, it was used as a single-family residence. And we've converted it to 3 condos. Needs 4 meters because one's for the fire suppression system. So we got 1 meter going into 4 meters. And we started the process more than a year ago because we're adding a solar system and we had to plan it out. But we got to the point 5 weeks ago where we had everything ready and we're waiting on Pepco, and we could not even get a single response on when they would look at it to put it on a schedule. So after a lot of frustration calling the same people and emailing them, I upgraded to emailing, calling, and texting multiple times a day to the same poor guy. And I was getting no response. And he was stuck in a system that he couldn't get any scheduling information. So he's a nice, wanting to be responsive person, but in a system that doesn't work. So it was on a Sunday night. Was it a Sunday night, Charlie? I just couldn't take it anymore at the thought we're not going to ever get power on there. So I started getting on LinkedIn and trying to see if I could connect any executives at the company and who would be where. So I got to thinking, well, I know the sequence, the email sequence that they use for their names. So I emailed the president of a whole list that's we've been working on this a year, and he had the whole string of it there. I emailed that right to him and let him know the problems that we were having. I'm sure he never saw it. I'm sure his administrative assistant escalated to their executive management team. And then I found the holding company, the investor relations vice president, her email, and sent it to her. And then I sent it to the regulatory agency that oversees Pepco. And would you know it, by 8:30 in the morning, the poor guy's boss's boss, who I was dealing with, phoned me and said that it had been escalated to their highest level of import, and that in fact they could get it done, and they could get it on a schedule. And that same day, they sent out their most senior electrical technician to meet our electrician to make sure everything was in order. And in fact, we're ready to go, and we'll be having that power on in just a day or two. So they were really flying. But without doing that, there was no hope to ever be on their schedule. It was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, for, you have to, and you did in this case, you document these efforts, you have notes,
Yeah.
whatever. And that's, I had done that in that other situation. It seems like that regulatory threat really wakes up public utilities. I guess it was the same utility, but their concern, right? They're a monopoly provider, and so the only way they can get in trouble is if the jurisdiction basically yells at them through the regulatory process. And I think they care about that metric, and so it's always good to, again, I guess I'm purposely using the word threat, but the threat of, hey, I don't know what else to do, I'm going to have to go to the regulator to get something, seems to work to wake people up. Don't do it immediately, make sure you have a good basis. But in both of these circumstances, there was a well documented trail of tears to of all the things that have been tried to make this happen. And then and as I recall with the first one, the DC regulating oversight body was excited, I think, about doing a regulatory complaint, because they're supposed to be there for that. I don't think it happens very often. And they were incredibly helpful dealing with Pepco and getting them to pay attention. And it all got resolved. And we didn't have to ultimately go after them we don't want that trouble and whatever. But when you're up at a year like Sam is, it's either that or just leaping off a bridge. About the only two options you have left.
So I did hold back when I found out the president was also on the board of the United Way. I was going to contact his folks at the United Way so they could get in touch with him, but I thought that might be just too much. So I did hold back just that little bit.
Yeah.
Not go all the way.
Well, and this is actually, it's another real lesson that back in my old life, there is a point with organizations like that where it's ultimately not their money, the person you're dealing with. So if you really attack somebody personally, or really embarrass them, or really upset the company, they can think, well, we're a multi-billion-dollar monopoly, and so we're just not going to help this person. We're going to, and at the end of the day, even if they got fined or there was some problem, you'll be long dead by the time that ever happens, and they're not going to lose their job. So there's a fine line between putting pressure on, but certainly the key is to be reasonable. So if anybody looks at the situation, they think, gee, this poor guy or gal has been trying to get this done and it hasn't happened, and only now are they doing this, and don't shoot the person. Once you've shot the person, there are repercussions. So if you actually file the regulatory action, you've got no leverage anymore. At that point, whatever the consequences are, probably you might be able to withdraw it or whatever, but you really have to do an escalating ratchet process to get these things done. And you've had a decent number of these problems across. Either that other one I was mentioning was a simple renovation, and this one that you're talking about, the church, is you turned into what, a three condo setup basically.
3 condos, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a gorgeous, you just sent me pictures, but boy, that's been a regulatory travail for you in DC.
Yeah.
Do you think the Pepco thing was the worst of all in that one, the
Yeah.
power?
Oh yeah, for certain. even though water and sewer connects were really not very problematic. They have
Right.
The truth
they
of
were
the matter is probably the people that can make the decisions and can clear up, some of this, the bureaucracy that you're going through, or they never even hear about these problems. They never hear about this. Like you said, as soon as that person that could do something about it heard about it, it was fixed. Same thing
right.
with me, and unfortunately, there's a process that you go through, and the people that are at those lower levels that are answering the phones, that feel like they can't do anything about it, and they don't care about you, Sam, and your condo conversion. But people higher up that get these great reports that say everything is fine, everyone's happy, they get these, I was in corporate America, back in corporate America for many years, and there are reports that go around every corporation that talk about how your business is performing, performance metrics they call it. So those reports are showing green, that everyone's happy, because they never get put on the report. So somebody's keeping that squashed down, that everyone's happy, until Sam called the person who gets the report. It was like, wait, my report showed green. Where did this red person come from? So you got to the right person, and made a red blip on someone's report, which is great.
Well, and I would also say, in this line of work, don't forget to send thank yous, so that even though you may not feel after a year of living hell and it gets resolved in a week, that makes you think, what happened to the other 51 weeks that I had to live with this? But it's, you're dealing with political offices or regulatory agencies or the oversight people. Send a nice note to that. Thank you to so and so for helping me cut through this, and for even the person who didn't cut through it before, thank you for coming in and at the end and working with us. Because if you do a couple of these things, they're going to remember you, and they're either going to remember you as the person who made their life difficult, or they're going to remember as you made their life a little difficult, but the end result was they didn't look bad to their boss, or it was a net positive. And then those political offices can be very helpful. They're regular people. If they've got 20 different things they're working on, and they remember they helped you out and you were very pleasant, and appreciative, you're going to get more of a relationship. Again, this is a foreign concept for me because this involves being nice to people, but I recommend it. And despite the difficulty, Sam, you're normally a nice guy, so it's easy for you.
There's no reason why there shouldn't be a procedure that says that we can do something different.
Okay, well, I'm still betting $1 that you're not going to get your money back.
And
I'm trying to also decide, should this be we can't go, I can't go there often, right? Like Ed said, you can't be there every year, with a complaint, or every 6 months with a complaint. Do I want to use my complaint? Do I want to use my chip right now, my yearly
For
chip?
$300, you're going to use
$300. Do I want to use it for that, or should I save it for something else? In hopes that nothing else ever happens. I don't want anything else to happen. Maybe this is it.
That's right out of the profit, Sam. That's $300 off the top. You could go a couple nice nights out, or a whole lot of Burger King.
Yeah, that's all true. Charlie, would you go for the 300?
Yeah, I mean, $300 for Sam is just a half a night out. I mean, a night out. I mean, a night out for Sam is $600.
So Charlie, would you go for it if you were Sandra?
Yeah, I'd go for it. Yeah.
You go ahead. Yeah. Well, we don't even need to ask Ed. We know what he would do.
Oh yeah, I'd go for it, because
he'd burn the city.
Right. Well, because you got it. This is the other thing. Where is this? Oh, this is happening for a friend of mine. I basically decided I'm going to cost the other side at least $5 for every dollar they won't give back. So if you figure, Sandra, you could, if they won't give you the $300, just put that in the back of your mind to cost the city $1,500 somewhere else. I guess then you end up paying it. So it's in your taxes.
Yeah, they'll pay it. Yeah.
So that's not such a good idea for this thing. This was a bank, the other one I was
we are not the only people who've done this. We can't be the only people who've done this.
No.
Either there's a way around.
The fee is to get the process done. So there's always glitches in the process. So you change the form and get the process. I'm on your side on the rightness of the issue, Sandra.
Right. There has to be a way. There has to be an if mistake, then do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, what if they were going to come out on a Tuesday and they came out on a Thursday instead, and you weren't there?
They don't come out. It's a guy.
They didn't even come out.
It's a guy who's in his living room.
The phone, he's like, that way, showing what we've done, and he still did it. And then he
yeah.
said, well, I can't send a report out because you're not in the
No.
right house.
No, no. Sandra's logic tree is totally wrong.
What?
It's so
Because
damaged.
here's
Because
so
it's
damaged.
logical. Her logic
No,
tree is wrong
no.
because it's logical.
Here's the logic. If mistake, dead end.
Yeah.
That's the logic.
That's it.
The
That's
computer
it.
program just comes to a thud.
That's it.
There's no logic tree. There's no yes or no. It's dead end.
That's so funny, Sandra.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I've dealt enough with the government that I'm a little upset about it. But I also know that escalation works the same way that Sam did. You kind of figure out what the naming convention is for emails, and you say, okay, this person must be XYZ at dc.gov. And I shot off about 5 emails this past summer to someone, and the boss's boss called me.
That's how that works.
Well, I
Poor
like
woman that once her boss's boss got to her and she called me, she wouldn't let me off the phone.
That's it. I get a call every day now from Pepco.
Yep, I hear you. I
I literally
everything
do.
you're saying. I hear everything that you're saying. And
Well,
I was like, I mentioned that I live in Ward, whatever. Oh, yes, I know that. Thank you.
Well, as usual, after pretty much an entire episode, we've gotten to a topic, which is dealing with when you're fixing and flipping property, dealing with regulations and government agencies and all of that. And boy, do we have some stories there. But
Ed, do you want to wrap it up? So what are your steps to get through this regulatory nightmare if you find yourself in a position where you can't get something done?
So yeah, I think one of our topics today, I think we had several, was how to deal with regulatory agencies or problems with government in getting your fix and flip done. And this is a good lesson in general, is to make sure to keep good notes and a good chronology of what you've done, who you've talked to. As soon as you realize there might be a little bit of an issue, go back, take notes on what you already did. When certainly emails are good, but oftentimes speaking to somebody is better, but you got to take notes. I talked to Tom Jones, supervisor of the electric division or whatever it is, so that, not necessarily to slam them, but to remember where you've been and to tell people, well, yes, I tried this office, I tried that office. And I think ultimately in Sam's one he was talking about today, that's what really got him over the hump, is when he found the right people, he was able to send them information about all the things he had done. And you can't do that without good note taking. And as I mentioned, ask people, say, hey, and you can be nice about it, which again is hard for me, but say, hey, can you let me know your name or your position or your office or your badge number or whatever is relevant to the conversation. I'm just trying to keep notes of what I've done, so I know who I've talked to, and I've never had anybody be offended by that. If you as opposed to, I'm going to call your boss and tell him you're a jackass and give me your name. That's probably not going to help the process as much as it might make you feel better. And usually you can get those things resolved, but it's part of the reason when people look at how much money can be made in real estate, it takes time and persistence, and it's not cost free to do this. I'm sure Sam would have rather been out water skiing or whatever instead of dealing with the regulatory agencies. One thing we wanted to add, and is having people send in their basement tales or their, this is a good example, their regulatory nightmare and how did they get by it, or questions about how they can resolve something. So send that into
yourstory@basementtales.com.
So I think that wraps it up for today, and we'll look forward to getting some feedback and questions from our audience. Rapid response at Sea Sky Financial? No.
Rapid responses for your coronavirus testing. This is just called fast response.